Why do you have a bias against Alexander and not the Persians? You say that Alexander brutally conquered the Persian Empire and that he was a cruel ruler. That was true. But how were the Persians any different? They were the ones to invade Greece in the first place, and they burned the city of Athens. Yeah. Alexander just took revenge on them. Okay. Yeah. Good question. I mean, I get where you're coming from. Now, have you studied the history of the Achaemenid Empire in detail, the Hakshamanish Empire? And have you studied the actual history of Alexander's career? If you have not, I mean, so, or have you just read a few paragraphs here and there and then you feel that I am biased? Look, first of all, you do understand that everyone is biased, including me. I have my biases. I am biased towards my country. I'm biased towards various things. It is natural for people to be biased. And those who claim to be unbiased are lying. Let's be very clear about that. So, first of all, there is that. Now, secondly, am I biased? You say that the Persians invaded Greece and destroyed Athens, and Alexander was taking revenge. Fair enough. That is indeed the case. But is that all there is to the life and career of Alexander the Greek? So, see, to understand the proper context of something, you need to read in detail. You can't just uh, draw your conclusions based on what somebody said or a couple of paragraphs or half a chapter or one chapter you read somewhere. Because most of the writings about Alexander are simply hagiographies in which they embellish his career and his achievements and they glorify his accomplishments. But you need to take a factual look at what Alexander did through his career. And you don't need to read an extensive book. Here is one book. Let me zoom in. Can I zoom in? Okay, I'm zooming out there. Let me show you this. This is a book. It's called Alexander the Great by Jacob Abbott, and this is a uh, very rapid, very concise uh, outline of his career. Okay, and here and before I tell you what Jacob Abbott writes about Alexander, let me give you a few highlights of Alexander's career. So, first of all, look, it's not about just taking revenge. When he was establishing himself as the top dog in Greece after the assassination of his father, Philip of Macedon, Alexander had to subjugate all potential rivals in Greece and establish himself as the undisputed overlord of Greece. So, what he did was he besieged a city called Thebes in about 330 something BC. Okay, he besieged this city, and uh, because Thebes sought to remain independent, and it kind of rebelled against him. So he besieged the city, and eventually the siege was broken, and his troops were able to enter the city, and they destroyed the city. We don't know how many people of the city were killed, but we know that about 30,000 or so survived. About 30,000 of these people, all those who survived, most of them, including women and children, were sold into slavery. Now, what does this have to do with Persia? This is Alexander's actions in Greece against Greek civilians, unarmed women and children. He sold them into slavery. And the entire city was systematically razed, block by block, brick by brick, to set an example, and to deter further rebellions. Absolute cruelty. So he spared some people. He spared those who he was sure that had not participated in the rebellion, but everybody else was either killed or sold into slavery. At least 30,000 people were sold into slavery, mainly women and children. Now, there wouldn't be that many surviving males after the defeat of Thebes. That's one example of what he did to his own people. Okay. Now, later, after he decided to invade invade Asia. So, and before he fought at Gaugamela against Darius II and so on, before Persia, he besieged the city of Tyre. Would you like to see where Tyre is? Let me show you where Tyre is. Okay. Uh, so let's find out where the city of Tyre is. Let's go to the map. Let's put the map on the screen. I'll show you where this happened. The city of Tyre. It's on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean. Okay, and it still exists. There's still a place called Tyre. And let's look at the satellite imagery. As you can see, there's a small peninsula like thing that juts out over here. It was once an island. This was once an island, and eventually this land was reclaimed. So there was a fortress on this island, and it was a few hundred meters out at sea. And this fortress was well defended, and it served as, from Alexander's perspective, it was a thorn in his flesh, and he wanted to take this city and this fortress before he went to Egypt, if I'm not mistaken, chronologically. So he besieged the city of Tyre, okay? And the siege of Tyre lasted about 7 months. He and his men repeatedly tried to build bridges to the island, and these bridges were repeatedly broken down by the defenders of the city, and he got more and more frustrated. The siege lasted 7 months, and eventually he captured the city. So during the siege, we don't know how many people or how many defenders died. Maybe several thousand defenders of the city were killed during the siege, uh, over the course of fighting. But after he captured the city, he crucified he crucified everybody he could find, and he crucified them along the shoreline as a warning to anybody who would in the future dare to resist him. And once again, the women and children were sold into slavery. So he crucified all the men, several thousand men. He put them, he crucified them all along the coast, and the women and children were sold into slavery. These are all factual matters. No historian can deny these matters. Okay, this is all matter of record. Then let's go to Persepolis. So eventually, he reaches Persia, and okay, so I'm not sure where Persepolis is. I'll not try and find it on the map. Let's put the map off the screen for now. Okay, so eventually, after taking Egypt, he fights against the Persians, against Darius II, and he defeats the Darius. Darius goes on the run for a few months, for a couple of years, whatever time it was, and Alexander takes the capital city of Persia, Parshvapur. It's called Persepolis today. The Persians today call it Parsa. Its original name was Parshvapur. So this capital city, he takes it, and he has a great party in the city, drunken party, and at night, after getting sufficiently drunk, he orders the city to be burned. So the entire city was burned. A great civilizational capital of the Persian civilization of the Persian Empire was burned, and this was allegedly in revenge for the Persian burning of Athens during the previous Greco-Persian wars. So if it was just about revenge, he would have been satisfied with the burning of Persepolis. But his actions go way beyond revenge. I mean, what was the need to crucify thousands of people along in the city of Tyre? Why did he have to sell women and children into slavery in Greece, in Thebes, in Tyre? And this is something he does repeatedly, over and over again. He's a barbarian. He's cruel. His campaign, throughout his conquests, he repeatedly enslaved large portions of defeated populations. Okay, and these actions, they targeted civilians, especially women and children, uh, in Thebes, in Tyre, in Persepolis. He employed terror tactics as a deliberate strategy to intimidate and subdue his opponents. So when he was done with Persia, he wanted to conquer India. So there is this region between Persia and India, the Balochistan kind of region, which is kind of culturally both cultures, civilizations. So as he went towards the Indus River, he would capture small towns, villages, and he would execute the natives, the inhabitants completely, all of them. Lots of crucifixions, lots of executions. There would be Brahmins who would refuse to cooperate with him and tell him about whatever information he wanted. He would crucify them, he would torture them, he would have them tortured. Public executions, brutal punishments, etc. Repeatedly, over and over again. Burning entire villages and their populations alive, destroying crops, destroying infrastructure, destroying settlements, and so on. So there was no limit to this guy's cruelty, Alexander. Okay, and wherever he conquered, he imposed the Greek culture, the Greek language, and Greek governance on the conquered region. I mean, look at what he did to Egypt. Most people think that Egypt lost its cultural identity as a consequence of the Roman occupation, which was done by Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, etc. We'll not go there. But Greece, it was Alexander who started this entire process. He conquered. He walked into Egypt without really having to fight. Yeah, the Egyptians were under the Persians, and they thought that he's a liberating. He's liberating us, but they ended up being enslaved by him. Right. So he appointed a governor of Egypt. His name was Ptolemy, and that was the beginning of the Ptolemaic Empire in Greece. And Greece, in Persia, I mean, what am I saying? In Egypt, and Egypt became very rapidly Hellenized after that. Queen Cleopatra, was entirely Greek. She wasn't Egyptian. She wasn't African. She was Greek, and so on. So that's the kind of career Alexander had. Terrible treatment of people, enslavement, death, and there was violence against women during his conquest of various cities. Sexual violence against women was commonplace. Women were frequently taken as spoils of war by his soldiers, and enslaved women faced systematic abuse. So, um, so if you look at what he did, he was a great conqueror. He failed, obviously, in India. He was defeated, and probably that cost him his life. But his conquests in other parts of the world, from Macedonia all the way to Persia, they spread Greek culture, Hellenistic culture, and ideas. Okay, but they came at the cost of immense human suffering and tremendous destruction. And if you look at it from today's perspective, under current international, so-called international law, like the Geneva Convention, etc., all of this would be classified as war crimes and crimes against humanity. Now, I'm not saying that the Persians were all they did not do any such things, but what Alexander did had nothing to do with revenge against the Persians. Now, let me read the last paragraph of this book written by Jacob Abbott. Okay, so the last paragraph. Alexander earned well the name and reputation of the great. He was truly great in all those powers and capacities that can elevate one man above his fellows. We cannot help applauding the extraordinary energy of his genius, though we condemn the selfish and cruel ends to which his life was devoted. He was simply a robber, but yet a robber on so vast a scale that mankind, in contemplating his career, has generally lost sight of the wickedness of his crimes in their admiration of the enormous magnitude of the scale on which they were perpetrated. That's the last paragraph, the concluding paragraph of this book by Jacob Abbott. So, is Jacob Abbott also biased against Alexander? You have to read history, you have to study history in the full in the full context. You have to understand the full context of what you're reading. You cannot simply uh, absorb the opinions of others and what they say. The whole world glorifies Alexander because the whole world sees history from a Eurocentric perspective. And they see the Persians as if you watch movies made about Alexander, they will show Persians as a rabble of ill-coordinated men who look definitively inferior to the Greeks and so on. That's the perspective that they subtly put forth, and that's something we are swallowing wholesale. We have to think critically. I have no bias against anybody from this perspective in this matter. Alexander wasn't Indian, neither were the Persians. How do I care? I'm not biased against anybody in this matter. When it comes to issues of the national interest, I'm biased towards India, no question about it. But in this matter, how do I care? So that's the deal. Okay, Alexander was truly wicked according to Jacob Abbott, and if you look at his career factually, you cannot deny it. But probably most of us, we don't do it. We look at what people write, one paragraph here, one paragraph there, summarizing his life and his career, and we think, oh, it's great. And then why is this Abhijit Chavda guy saying bad things about Alexander? He must be biased. Please, please take some time to study things properly.